review what we've learned in the other churches. We've learned that what God doesn't like. What are those three things he doesn't like in a church? You know, Harold, this makes me think of a class, you know?
You're doing great, Beverly. I'm so happy to be back here.
I'm glad too. What is it? False teachers. Come on, this one's an easy one. None of y'all do it, but it's easy to remember. Adulteress or immorality. And complacency. So we have idolatry or false teaching, immorality, and complacency. Those are the three things we've consistently learned from Ephesians. What was Ephesians? What was the complaint Christ had with the church in Ephesus? They left their first love, didn't they? So each church has given us a view of how Christ looks at churches, not how the world looks at our church, to let us know how we're doing. And he loves us so much that he will tell us what he's approving of in our church, and then he tells us what we need to work on or repent of or change. And he does that out of love, is what we've learned, right? And then he tells us, like we would tell our children, if you do this, here's your reward. If you do not, here's what's going to happen. So he's very specific in how he talks to these churches. You remember we learned that Christ himself is the author of the book of Revelation. And that Revelation, although many of you have been indoctrinated to believe it is impossible to understand, that's not true according to the first chapter. It says, send it to the churches so they will understand. And so it is something Christ believes we understand, and I do too. We've understood these things about these churches, haven't we? It's not been difficult. And so once we understand that Christ is trying to tell us, if your church has all these things that I approve of, you're good. Only 2 of the 7 churches get that commendation from him. Smyrna and the one today, Philadelphia. They have some things in common. They're both kind of poor, financially speaking, and they're small. So that goes against and contrary to, as we talked about, what is popular today. When we look at a church, we measure it by numbers. We measure it by programs. We measure it by everything that humans say is success. And yet we learned Ephesus was a large, wealthy church. So was Pergamon and some of the others. They weren't pleasing to God. But these 2 are the only 2 of the 7 that are pleasing to God completely in purity. Because in his eyes, they're wealthy. They have what makes us wealthy as a church. And so as we look at these churches, we find that they provide a picture for us to understand what is pleasing to God. Therefore, if we understand what is pleasing to God, we can work to become a church that is pleasing to God. So, Today we're going to look at the Church of Philadelphia. Last week was a hard lesson, don't y'all think? That was difficult for me to teach anyway. It had lots of stuff in it. The last two have had. You know, we don't want to be a church that entertains Jezebel and her followers, right? And nobody likes to hear those messages, those lessons either. We don't like to hear about those churches that are tolerating false teachers. And what do we do about that? And Tom was here that week, thank goodness, and he just really made us have to think about it. And those are hard lessons to present to people. But today, this should be fun, right? But we're going to look at it by looking at who the Philadelphia church is. What does Philadelphia mean? We even know this today. Yeah, do you know how it came to mean that? The king of Pergamon, his name was Artemis II, loved his brother. He had a brother that he absolutely, it was like our Jordan and Jackson, just loved his brother. And so he started or founded the city of Philadelphia. And so it was called Lover of Brother, and it's become brotherly love in the meaning of it. And when he started Philadelphia, this is not a Roman colony, by the way. It is a Greek city. It was founded for the purpose of educating people or promoting Greek culture, which includes all their gods, and the language, the Greek language, which we know they must have done that pretty well because it was quite the language like English is today during that time. So we're looking at a city that is on a hill. It was hit by an earthquake. I believe it was an earthquake, some tragedy like that, and it destroyed it. And so a lot of people had to go out to the countryside to survive. And the Church of Philadelphia is one of those that ended up out in the countryside with this small population of Christians in it, continuing on. But I will tell you the good news, even today, that church still exists in that little town, in that area. Now, you know that Asia Minor is in Turkey, right? So all these we've been able to pinpoint in places in Turkey today. So this one was on a road that was quite the road for commerce to travel. Be like I-40 or I-35, okay? It's got traffic all the time. And so as we understand where this church is, you'll understand that it's not easy to maintain good sound doctrine and faith because there's a lot of pull, you know, from the culture on them. And so as we look at this, I want us to remember that staying faithful to the truth of Jesus Christ is at the crux of what we're expected to do. And that's what these 7 churches are helping us understand. You remember when Paul went through Athens? Do you remember what he saw?
The statues of them on God.
Of all their gods, or of all gods, even an unknown God, which gave him opportunity to talk about the unknown God. They didn't know him for sure. And so that's one of the reasons I think that the church in Philadelphia did not suffer a lot of persecution from Rome or from Greece. Greek they were okay. You know, whatever you believe is okay, was kind of their philosophy. And so they didn't have that kind of persecution. But we will find that there was some harassment and persecution as we look at this church. So let's start with verse 7. And we're going to look at the greeting of Christ to the church. You remember what I told you? He always identifies himself with the characteristics that were in the first chapter of Christ. This is not Christ, the man who walked on the earth. This is not Christ who was humble and kind and died on a cross. This is Christ who's going to return for us one day. This is Christ, the judge of the unsaved. So this is God, okay? And so we're going to see how he describes himself in this first verse. Jamie, would you read verse 7?
Sure.
I'm sorry, it's just verse 7. Go ahead.
And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write. He who is holy, who is true, and who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one opens, says this.
All right. Who is this Christ? There's three names he gives himself. The Holy One, True One,
Holder of the key, David.
You're going to explain that, right?
yeah. Okay, we have the Holy One, the True One, the one who holds the key of David. That is the phrase from the Old Testament all the way through the New Testament, because Christ is the descendant of David's lineage. And he is the one who was said to be the Messiah who holds the key. And that was a phrase for how they would say that, much like the Son of Man is a phrase for the Messiah. And so this is talking about Christ holding the key. Because he holds the key, what does it say in that verse that he's capable of doing?
Opening the door, closing it.
Carol knows that.
Yes.
I'm so glad for that illustration today. The open door means that no one can shut us out. The open door is like security of the believer. It gives us confidence. He has the key. No one can shut us out of the presence of God. And what he shuts are those who are not of the family of God. He's the one who makes this decision, is what it's telling us. But it's also telling us that we can have confidence that he is the only one who has the ability to open that door and to shut that door. Also, that open door that he provides for his people has another significance.
Access to God.
Access to God in prayer. What else can you think of? When we say, I hear people a lot say, well, I know he'll open a door if he closes one. Well, I don't. I mean, he may just want that door closed for all I know. Sorry. But he opens the door for us to have opportunities to serve him, to share the gospel, to share love, to share by putting food together in a basket, putting boxes together, to share by praying for people. Do you see that open door? It's It's a whole new world we walk into through that door that he has for us. And that's what he's telling this church that he loves so much. I've opened the door for you. Don't worry about it. And I think that's just an amazing verse that we have to see the nature of Christ. So this is who he's telling them he is, that's writing this letter to them. So let's look at verse 8. Who has that? Do you have it, Crystal?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you read it?
I know all the things you do, and I have opened the door for you that no one can close. You have little strength, yet you obeyed my word and did not deny me. Pretty cut and dry.
Do you know how Christ knows their deeds and knows what their situation is and what's going on?
He sees everything. Omnipresent. Mm-hmm.
Say that louder.
Omnipresent.
Omnipresent. Remember, he's in the midst of the candlesticks, right? And the candlesticks are the churches. And so he's here with us today, walking through, and he knows what Ryan preached. He knows how people responded. He knows what's going on in here. And that's what he's telling them. I know, and I know you don't have any power. You don't have any ability to do much of anything. And so he says, but, we like the buts, right? In our language. But you have kept my word and have not renounced or denied my name. He'll do it again in this letter, but what is it that Christ always says in the letter about those who conquer? Every letter we've had this same verbiage. And to he who conquers, we'll go over here and read it for you. Bless your hearts. He who overcomes the world through believing that Jesus is the Son of God. Do you remember? Every letter has this. Christ doesn't ask a lot, but it costs everything. He asks us to hang on to hold on to our faith, our belief, our knowledge that he is the Messiah. He was, he is, he will be. There is no other Messiah. There is no other name under the face of the earth that we can come to God except through Jesus Christ. So, do you now see why complacency within a church is something that God can't tolerate? When I hear a person say, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere, I go, well, that works if you sincerely want to go to hell. That doesn't make any sense to me. That'd be like me telling Tom, well, you know, as long as I mean well. No. As long as I'm committed, as long as I'm faithful, as long as I love, as long as I'm there. There's a difference. And so God hates complacency. And so every letter is prefaced with, you conquer, you overcome by believing that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. That's the one thing that causes all our problems even today. It has all through the years of the church, clear to today.
It kind of runs parallel to lukewarmness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to get that one next week. That's going to be a fun one to end on. So, as we look at how he introduces himself, and then he goes on to tell them, I know your deeds, and I know you don't have a lot to work with. but you have done those things that are important to God. Let's look in verse 9, and we will see who is antagonizing the church. Tom, would you read that?
Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet and learn that I have loved you.
Wow. Y'all like that verse? You remember it was in the church to Smyrna in the 9th verse of the 2nd chapter. And we discussed this. I know you're suffering in poverty and how you are blasphemed and slandered by those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. They are only Jews by blood and do not believe and truly honor God whom they claim to worship. And the writer, Sam Storm, said, it defies logic for people to think that God's people are the nation of Israel, when in the New Testament, it is the church, the believers, who are the people of God, us. And I thought, yes, that's true, but, we're going to look at that again in a few minutes. What else does it say in that verse that stands out to anyone?
He's going to make them bow down at their feet. That's incredible.
Yes, it is. And I can give you several verses from the Old Testament that talk about how time after time in the Old Covenant, when Israel was moving across, and God would say, if you'll do this, here's what I'm going to do for you. And it was that the other nations would bow down to them, that the other nations would bow down and acknowledge that their God, our God, is the only God. And so it runs through the Old Testament for the people of Israel, but obviously that changes as we move in to the New Testament. And this is the second time in these 7 churches that we've been told that to Christ, he calls them the synagogue of Satan, oppressing and harassing his people. And he doesn't like it. And so Tom always says, if God tells you something 3 times, you need to listen. So we've got 2 out of the way. I've got a feeling we're going to get a 3rd here in the next few weeks. So after that, we come to the last part of that verse. I want to look at it again. I'll have them bow down and make known to them that I have loved you. He's separating it, isn't he? Why? What have they done that makes him love them? Well, that's in our next verse, verse 10. David, would you read that?
Because you have kept the word of my perseverance, I also will keep you from the hour of testing, that hour which is about to come upon the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth.
There's coming more problems for the church in the first century, and that's what Christ is telling them about. And when he says that because you've kept my word, I will keep you safe from the hour of trial. He doesn't say he's going to keep them from the trial, does he? You remember every letter, he said, yes, I know. Some of you are going to die. Some of you are going to be persecuted to the point of death. He says it in all of them. He never tells them he's not going to let that happen. Nowhere in the New Testament are we told that we're going to get out of trials and tribulations as Christians. We're just told to count it all as joy. Well, that's not fun. Yes, that's what he's telling us right here. I will walk through this time with you. I will keep you spiritually safe, secure in who you are as you have to go through these troubled times. And I thought about that and I thought, okay, but isn't that a given? No, it's not. Tom could tell us, he could take the rest of our time today and tell us all the people that he worked with in hospice who would walk away from their faith because someone died. I mean, death is inevitable, right? Or because a child got sick and died. How dare God take a child? All these different things I've heard people walk away. I have a young man that I have seen, and he walked away from God because of the hypocrisy of Christianity he saw in his family, who were supposed to be really, really amazing Christians and were by the world's standards. But he walked away from it and he refuses to raise his children in it. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons people walk away from God. And he's telling his people and he's telling us, because it applies to us too, I will walk through that with you. Whatever it is, illness, loss, financial ruin, so what? The biggest thing that this church has is a lasting faith in God no matter what's happened. Earthquake, loss of home, loss of all their material possessions, loss of their jobs, loss of everything. But they still have their faith, undying faith in Jesus Christ.
Beverly,
Yes.
don't know if Pam would share this, but that's exactly what she shared with me just before Sunday school started, her trial regarding her sons.
God was with me through both of the tragedies because it was absolutely devastating when our first son got in touch with, I can't remember how many thousands of electricity anyway, and was burnt really bad and died from that. And the whole church just came out and was right there, and it was just amazing how I have a hard time talking about it still. But anyway, God was with me there. And then our second son died of AIDS, and that was devastating. And anyway, I can't talk about it. I will cry too much.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that.
Losing one child is awful.
Yeah.
Losing two is catastrophic.
And I think God is obviously with her now through this trial that has Sister Pam.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you.
As we look at the second half of verse 10, it talks about, I will keep you safe from the hour of trial, that hour which is about to come on the whole inhabitants of the world, to test those who live on the earth. And I want to point out that is the lost people, that is the unsaved that he's talking about testing. That term, who live on the earth, is a term used in Revelation numerous times to talk about those who are outside the faith. And God is testing them, going to test them through this tribulation that's coming. And he's again giving them security of the believer, telling them, I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to be with you, and you're going to be okay. So there's a lot of comfort and promise in this chapter, I think, in this letter to Philadelphia. Well, let's go ahead and look at 12 because it's just packed full of good stuff.
Could you just stay for a minute? The second part of my translation, it says, so that no one takes your crown.
Yes. Where did we have that?
11.
Oh, yeah. I think we're getting ready to do that. I said 12, but it's 11 and 12. I'm sorry. Yes. Let's go ahead and read 11 and 12. All right.
I'm coming quickly. Hold on to what you have, so that no one takes your crown. The victor, I will make him a pillar in the sanctuary of my God, and he will never go out again. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes out of heaven from my God, and my new name.
Okay. Let's go back to 11. I am coming quickly. Hold tight what you have, so that no one will take your crown, leading you to renounce your faith. That's a challenging verse. I think it's in Hebrews 11. Is that right, Tom? 11:6 maybe, where it talks about those who walk away from God and reject Him. They're lost and there's no hope for them any longer. So that's what my translation says, by leading you to renounce the faith. I'm not sure exactly what it's meaning there. Does anyone else want to offer some ideas, and we'll talk about them?
Well, like was just mentioned about losing, you mentioned earlier about your husband working with people who have lost someone. And that's when Satan can enter in, try very hard to take away our joy. And that's, if you can overcome that and remember where they're going, and hopefully they had the opportunity to make that choice, then it's joy. And even if you're not sure, God's the judge, not me, not the father, the mother, the grandmother. That's God's choice, to give them another chance or to take them, I mean, God didn't take them, is my opinion. The world, we're here in the world to learn and to hear God's message and Jesus' words. And we have to remember that losing someone, that isn't the end of this experience.
No, it's that open door that just takes us right where we were supposed to be. Yeah.
Beverly, your reference is to Hebrews 6:6. And the idea there that most Baptists hold to is that they had a taste of God in the sense of an awareness of who He was, an awareness of
a witness, maybe.
They appeared to have experienced that, but when trials and trouble and hardship came, they abandoned it because they just could not see
It wasn't really, it was like seed on the rocks. It didn't take root.
Well, there are some verses where Jesus talks about the crown. You want to share some of those? One is James 1:12. It says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him. And then earlier, what you studied in previous Sundays, Revelation 2:10,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus says, "Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life." And there's some other ones in some of the writings of Paul, in letters that he wrote, like 1 Corinthians is one, 9:25, and then there's another one in 2 Timothy that he writes, and so on. So, I mean, there's a number of examples that's in the New Testament, particularly in the epistles and so on.
I don't know that I think any of those verses or this one is saying somebody's going to do that. I think they're spoken in the way of encouraging us to stand firm and to stay faithful. I think that, to me, it's more on the positive side of this church. He's not condemning them for anything. He knows their faith, and he knows they're going to stand firm. They already have stood firm through so much. Nothing that's coming along could be any worse than that for them. I think he's just encouraging them again, saying, I'm going to be there quickly. And for me, I thought about that, and I thought, he's just a prayer away. He's always close when we need him to strengthen us and to keep us going. And so he says, I'm coming quickly. Just hold tight, like you're holding onto a rope and you're going to fall 300 feet or something, you know. That's my biggest terror, okay? And I'll never be on that rope. But anyway, but to me, I think it's telling us that Christ is saying, I've got you, and you're going to be okay. And your crown is secure because I've got you, and you're going to be okay.
He reiterates that so many times, you know, and says, I hold you in my hand, and no one, nothing, pluck you out of that safe place.
That's right. Yeah, that's in John, I think. Yes, no, there's another one. Maybe John 15:19 through 20. Let me look. No, that's not it. Anyway, it does talk about that God holds us in his hand and Christ holds us in his hand, and that no one can take us out of his hand. And so that again is that security of our position, of our salvation with God. So yes, it's repeated over and over and over again.
Beverly, I think some people in their Christian faith get to the point saying, I've crossed all the T's, I've dotted all the I's, and therefore nothing bad is supposed to happen to me, like Pam's situation. And then that's where they say, that's it. I no longer believe, God, you failed me. And that's where they are. But what we're going to talk about here is, regardless what happens and everything, keep the faith, keep going, keep believing, keep trusting, keep this, and a lot of people just can't make that second step.
Well, I would tell you, I believe they were indoctrinated for years through the televangelist and others in their churches, telling them that if you do all these things and check all these boxes, then God has to. Yeah, and God doesn't have to do anything. In case you're confused today, we are saved by the grace of God, by the mercy, and it is not
good works.
Yeah, it's not anything we're going to do. Our good works are not even good. Isn't that terrible? But that's the truth.
Well, I'm just going to say, and talking about the crown, Jesus talks a lot about rewards in heaven. And I'll just read one of them to you, and that comes from Matthew. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil things against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. Yeah, there are rewards. And that's part of the crown that is being talked about here.
Thank you. Well, let's look at verse 12. He who overcomes the world through believing that Jesus is the Son of God. Now then, we're going to look at some things that God has promised us, that Christ has promised us he's going to do if we keep that promise, if we do that. I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Now, a pillar, we think of the util value of it, right? It holds buildings up. But how many of you have ever gone to you've traveled around the world and you've gone to I'm going to say a Catholic church, a Buddhist temple, Islam, a place that they've built. There's a beautiful one in southern Spain that we went to. Those pillars are for beauty. They're like a piece of art that people stand and look at. They're ornate and gorgeous. And one writer said, I believe that he's telling us he's going to make us a pillar that beautifies and enhances the temple. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about what the temple of God is, and probably have to close on that. But it says he will most certainly never be put out of it. Again, he's assuring us that we're solid as that pillar inside that. Okay? We can't be moved. Y'all know what happens when Samson took those pillars out, right? He says, nothing's going to move us. We're there. We're secure. But then he goes on to say, will most certainly never be put out, and I will write on him. Now get these things, they're important. The name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which descends out of heaven from my God, and my new name. I'm going to write those things. He just gave us an address. We have send it to God, care of the New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven, signed by Jesus. We've got it all. And that's what he's telling them, that there's going to be a new name for Jesus that we haven't gotten yet at that point. And it's going to be the name of my God. And then when he talks about the New Jerusalem, this verse has been used for a lot of different ideas. So I'm just going to give you mine. It is the temple in heaven of where God is, and it's going to come down out of heaven. There is no way it is a temple in Israel, Jerusalem. God is not going to ordain that a real temple ever be built again in Jerusalem. There's no need. This is not saying it's a New Jerusalem out of Israel. It's out of where? Heaven. Where are we hoping to go to? Jerusalem or heaven? Heaven. So, while I know that a lot has been said and read into or made up for the book of Revelation, I just want you to know, if you read the passage here, it says, this is the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which descends out of heaven. Why wouldn't it be a New Jerusalem? We're a new covenant. We're a new people. And I've heard several of you this morning quote 2 Corinthians 5:17. The old's out, the new's in. So as he talks about that, he says, and remember we said these are spiritual ears. He who has an ear, let him hear and heed what the Spirit has to say in this letter that he likes what this church is doing. We need to pay heed to that. We need to spiritually be praying that we are a church like Philadelphia. Even in times of trouble, they hung on to the name of Jesus. And so as we close out this one, next week, that one's the most well-known of all the churches. We've heard people memorize scriptures out of it. They use them for different things. But we're going to take a good look at the last church of the seven. And remember, I told you in the very beginning that there are series of sevens. There's about 4 sevens in the book of Revelation. They all have the same messages for us of hope and encouragement and understanding. But this will be our last one of the 7 churches, and then we'll go to the 7 seals. Yes, Harold.
Beverly, could I come back to what you talked about in the very beginning of the class? You mentioned about what God does not like, the three things.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of them, the first one mentioned was false teaching.
Mm-hmm.
The second was immorality. So you can take yourself back in the time of the period of that church when it was being developed, and you look at the culture and the community at that time.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there were lots of teaching about so many strange things, and also immorality was actually promoted by the government, by the cities. It was true. I mean, it was widely promoted.
That's why this lasts from there to us to the end of time.
Well, what's important for us in getting from this here is to look at the things that are in our community. What are the things that are out there that we don't want to bring in the church? Because, we live in the community, we live in society, and, a lot of things are going on out there but it's so easy for us to do that because they're part of our community. So easy to bring them in. So looking at those things, as a lesson from here, I think it's important to look and see what are those things out there that we don't want to bring into our church.
Right.
It's so easy to do.
Well, in several of the churches we talked about, their jobs depended on them belonging to a union or a guild, and each of those guilds had gods, and they had to go and participate in those religious practices, which part of that was immorality, sexual immorality. And God said, if you don't stop it, we're going to have a problem. And so 2 or 3 of the churches had that. The church that had Jezebel in it, she was telling them, it doesn't matter. She was a false prophet. You can see why that would have been a hard lesson for me to teach, right? And she was leading a group of people into immorality, and the church was complacent. Some of them weren't following that. We have it divided. Okay, we have this group over here, or they're still faithful to the word. This group over here says, I don't think that's so bad. Come on. People mess up. People make mistakes. Blah, blah, blah. And this group over here are going, oh, just keep your mouth shut and don't pay any attention to them. Maybe they'll go away. And we learned that God doesn't like that. He doesn't like that, and he doesn't like that. We don't have the option of complacency or toleration, if you like that word better. We don't. And so we studied those churches that had tried to embrace society's norms. And we talked about, we've got to be bold witnesses and stand firm. It's not fun. I'm not telling you it is. And not everybody has a personality to do that, honestly. But you still stand firm. Tom and I are as different as day and night, and I'm pretty bold. Y'all know that. I'll tell you what I think. But you don't push him. You're not going to change his mind about his faith. And if you get very in his face, he'll let you know. But he's not like me. I don't want you in my face. I'm just going to tell you. you know. And so it's two different ways of standing firm in the faith. Not everybody has to be like me. You know, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying we have to be bold and we have to stand firm. 9,000 people in Norman, Oklahoma Thursday night stood firm for the idea of Christianity having a revival. And that, to me, was something to praise God for, to thank Him for. One of the people that gave a testimony that night was the most hellacious drug. He had tried every religion on the planet, and he got to know Charlie Kirk. They were friends. Someone else shared the gospel with him. He started studying the Bible on his own, and he said, yeah, the only way I can stay drug-free is Jesus Christ. And that became his testimony.
Amy, were you in town? Do you know what she's talking about? Okay. So, thank you.
So, those kinds of things, we can be on one side or the other of them, but they are a testimony to a revival in our country, and we need to be praying for that. We need to be praying for young people who all across this country have stepped up and said, we believe Jesus is the Messiah, and we're going to stand for that, and we're going to tell people about it. So they're going to live their lives like the Philadelphians did, standing firm, trusting God.
Comment on what Harold was saying. We tried to do that, Harold, in the Baptist church with the covenant, and in society's norms, it was okay to gamble, to drink, and there was another one that they had in there, dance, and go to movies and have TV. There was a covenant back in the early years of the Baptist church that when you became a member, you signed that covenant saying you wouldn't dance, or you wouldn't teach your children to dance, you wouldn't go to movies, you wouldn't gamble, and you wouldn't drink. And they were trying to be distinct from
the world,
because that's what they saw, but it didn't work. And it doesn't work. I don't know how you help people not to bring in the things of the world into their life, their family, and their church. I think Jesus talked a little bit about that when he talked about the tares. And
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
The weed, because there's going to be that in there. Yeah, it's going to be in there, but then he's going to sift it out. But you know, I just remembered that when you said that. How do we do that? Well, they tried to do that. Of course, in our society, they tried to do that through prohibition. And that didn't work too well.
No.
So anyway, just thinking.
Well, I think for me, just to add a comment to that, I focus on sin, not things we've labeled sins, because I think the biggest thing, once you get in your mind, I tell people a lot in my office when they need to change the way they're doing things. Well, you know, as a man thinks, so he is. If you want to change, you're going to have to change your thinking, then you will accomplish it. And everyone who's done that comes back and tells me, man, that is the best thing anybody ever told me. You know, it's profound in the sense of where it comes from, but it wasn't profound because I can say that to somebody. But I think once we get right with God, we're not going to want to do the things that society signs off on. I was one of those that was under that covenant.
Just a humorous note, if we could. I know we got to stop, but I was a pastor in Texas, and the deacons had a smoking station between Sunday school and church. I come up here, become a pastor in Oklahoma, and you can't be a deacon if you smoke. And another little fun one is in First Baptist, when our boys were there, they knew the idea that you shouldn't dance, so they taught them how to line walk.
Yeah.
We could do square dancing.
I appreciate your point.
Yeah, very good. Thank y'all this morning.
Thank you.
Oh, I know, but